The answer to the "we were on a break" debate is in the episode itself. It has always been in the episode. Ross and Rachel's breakup in Friends is one of those moments everyone thinks is genuinely ambiguous, like the show left it open on purpose. But watch those episodes and follow the sequence without the laugh track deciding how to feel about it. The conclusion is not complicated. The break was real. Ross was right that they were broken up. This is what Friends establishes in plain dialogue in season 3. So why does almost nobody walk away from Friends thinking that? The show handed us a clear set of facts, left them completely intact, and still got 20 million people a week to a different conclusion. It gave us the facts about Ross and Rachel and built a separate verdict around them. And it worked so well that 3 decades later, we are still relegating something the show resolved very early in its run. We're not picking a side, but we are going to look at how Friends picked one for us. In February of 1997, Friends aired the episode titled "The One Where Ross and Rachel Take a Break." In it, Rachel tells Ross she needs a break. Not exactly from him, but from the suffocation of a relationship that has started to feel like a second job neither of them applied for. Ross hears something final in that, and he leaves. But here's a very important detail that doesn't get talked about enough. Before anything happens with Chloe, Ross calls Rachel from a payphone to try to fix things. He wants to apologize. He's reaching back. And when Rachel picks up, he hears Mark's voice in her apartment. Mark, the guy he has been threatened by for months. The one at the center of every fight about boundaries and jealousy and whether Rachel's career was really just cover for something else. Ross hears that voice, and whatever slim hope he had that the break was temporary closes in real time. Only then does the night go the direction it goes. That phone call is in the episode. It is what turns the break into a breakup in Ross's head in the moment with confirmation. It is also almost never mentioned when people argue about whether he was right. That absence is doing work. Ross ends up at a bar with Joey and Chandler. Not the coffee shop, but a bar, which for this show is already a signal that something about this situation is different. Chloe from the copy place is there. Ross, drunk, grieving, operating at maybe 30% cognitive capacity, makes a decision. The next morning, Rachel calls. She is warm. She wants to fix things. Then, she finds out. Those clips have been recirculating online long enough that some of us have probably watched the morning after scene more recently than we have called our own parents. Jennifer Aniston in that scene is doing something specific and devastating. The kind of performance that makes us forget we are watching a sitcom for about 30 seconds. What we remember most in that scene is Rachel's face. Not the phone call Ross made an hour earlier. Not what he believed when he left that apartment. Just her devastated face. And the show knew that would be enough. So Ross and Rachel were broken up. Ross understood himself to be single when it happened. What he did that night falls inside the break. The show establishes this and then spends the next several seasons making sure we cannot hold on to it. Every reaction shot, every laugh track placement, every second of screen time spent on Rachel's grief, rather than Ross's context, that is the argument. Not a written case against them, just a situation where his case never gets traction. Ross has the facts, the timeline, the word break coming directly out of Rachel's mouth in the previous episode, and a phone call that confirmed his worst fear before anything happened. He brings all of it up repeatedly across multiple episodes and multiple seasons. The laugh track wins every single time. A correct defense, losing to sound design. This is the whole thing right there. Ross's jealousy runs the same way every time. He's been in love with Rachel since high school, and she was always slightly out of reach, and the distance between finally having her and the fear of losing her never really closes. When Mark becomes Rachel's work friend, Ross escalates the situation. He calls constantly. He arrives at her workplace with flowers and gestures that are, on closer inspection, anxiety with a card attached. At one point, he sends a barbershop quartet to her office, a man who has genuinely confused romantic with impossible to ignore during a meeting. What Ross was actually doing was loving a version of Rachel that stayed still, but Rachel kept moving. Her career takes off. She figures out who she is outside of whatever the relationship currently requires. Ross responds to that development like it is something happening to him personally, which tells us everything about where the tension is actually located. By the time they reach the break, the pattern has been running long enough that the break makes complete sense. Both of them have earned it. Ross believes the relationship is over when he leaves the apartment. He calls to fix it. He hears Mark, he hangs up, he ends up at the bar with Joey and Chandler. He runs into Chloe. When she starts dancing with him, Joey and Chandler don't cheer him on. They wince. They can see the bad idea forming in real time, but they don't stop it either. Joey is the one person present who can speak to what Ross understood at that time and the only available witness to the full context of that night. The next morning, Joey's first instinct is not moral outrage, it's damage control. He and Chandler treat the situation like something to be managed quietly, rather than something Ross needs to answer for, because on some level, they were there and they know what Ross believed when it happened. Their silence in the face of Rachel's grief is not an admission of Rachel's guilt. It is something closer to a failure of nerve. Nobody steps up to say what the night actually looked like from the inside. That same morning, Rachel leaves a voicemail. She says she's sorry. She says she wants to try and reconcile, which means she spent that night still considering them a couple, a position she had not communicated to Ross before he walked out the door. Two people, one break, two completely different understandings of what it meant the moment it started. Ross spends the next stretch of the episode frantically trying to close the trail. Visiting Chloe, visiting Isaac the DJ, visiting anyone who might carry the news back to Rachel before he can explain it himself. He almost succeeds. Gunther is the one who tells her, at Central Perk, before Ross ever gets the chance. Jennifer Aniston in that scene is once again extraordinary. The camera knows exactly what it has and parks there. The show gives Rachel the long take. We stare in her face through the entire arc of the revelation. The micro shifts as her understanding changes, the moment the warmth drains out. We are inside her experience completely. Ross is shot differently. Quick cuts, reactive, defensive. We are watching him from the outside while we are watching her from the inside, and that choice determines everything about how we process what follows. We get Rachel's experience, we get information about Ross, and everything that follows runs straight through that difference. Once we are standing inside Rachel's grief, everything Ross says gets evaluated from inside it. His explanation lands as deflection. His context lands as excuse-making. We were on a break. Accurate, the only real defense he has, gets repeated across multiple episodes, each time wrapped in reaction shots and laugh tracks, until the phrase stops sounding like a defense at all. It starts sounding like the thing a guilty person keeps returning to because he has run out of better options. The show never refutes it. It just keeps repackaging it as evidence of guilt, with enough repetition that the repackaging becomes the memory. Most of us don't remember the argument. We remember watching someone lose it. And this is worth stopping on, because it goes directly to the question of whether Ross was right about the break, and what the show actually does with that answer. He was right. The break happened. He called to reconcile and heard Mark's voice and made a reasonable conclusion from that. What actually happened in that breakup, when you follow it beat by beat, is that two people ended a relationship, one of them acted like it was over, and the other retroactively decided it was not. Friends does not dispute this. What it does instead is make Ross's correct position feel, through every tool available to a network sitcom, like the thing a guilty person would say. The verdict arrives before the argument. Once you see that running underneath the entire Ross and Rachel debate, the debate looks completely different. Monica's reaction confirms the verdict. Chandler's discomfort confirms it as well. The group tilts. We follow the group, because this is how sitcom moral logic operates. The ensemble is the chorus, and the chorus tells us where to land. The laugh track hits "We were on a break" like a rim shot every time Ross says it, and by later seasons, that is a remarkable number of times. Ross is not losing the argument on the merits. He is losing because the show decided at the level of sound design that his defense would land as comedy. Say a true thing inside that frame often enough, and it starts to read as evasion. Now, bear in mind, this is 1997, so there's no pausing or rewatching. You watch Thursday's episode, and whatever it left you with, you carried it into the rest of your week. That matters. A show that needs you to hold two conflicting ideas at once. Number one, Ross was right. And number two, Rachel's pain is real. And both things are true simultaneously. We can make the case that weekly television was never built to hold that much ambiguity. So Friends chose for us. Not by changing what happened, but by deciding whose story we were living inside. Both characters were on screen. Only one of them got the close-up. And when you only get one shot at an episode, one viewing, no rewind, the close-up is the one thing you take with you. Friends is not the only show that runs this. Seinfeld built Jerry and George as genuinely selfish people. Jerry once ended a relationship because a woman ate her peas one at a time, which the show framed as a relatable quirk rather than a personality indictment, and audiences spent 9 seasons rooting for them without registering the contradiction, and largely still do. The Office established factually that Michael Scott is an awful manager, but it produced enough Michael perspective scenes that he became a beloved figure, and now his quotes appear in corporate motivational content. This is the most ironic Michael Scott outcome possible, and also the most efficient proof available that how a show frames someone matters more than what it actually is showing them doing. Friends just ran the same operation on a question simple enough that we thought we could answer it, which is exactly why we never have. The same thing keeps happening every few months because the show installed 2 incompatible conclusions through the same scenes. The plot says Ross was right. He was on a break. The break was real. He was single. He even called to reconcile and got confirmation that the relationship was over before anything happened. The framing says none of that matters. Both arrive through the same episodes, the same camera, the same performances, so both feel what the show intended. Ross defenders are pulling from the plot. Rachel defenders are pulling from the framing. Neither side can fully land on the other because they are not actually disagreeing about what happened. They are disagreeing about which layer of the show is supposed to count. The show never closes the gap. It's left open, it keeps producing the same output. Someone reruns the clip, someone pushes back, the comment section reignites, the clip circulates again and again. Now before we get into the final piece of this, there's one moment worth mentioning and holding on to. Later in the series, when the show reveals that Ross is the father of Rachel's baby, the live studio audience cheers. Very loudly. We cheered at home too, and we'll come back to this. But sit with that for a second, because after years of being framed as the one who ruined everything, we still cheered, still wanted them together, still rooted for Ross. And that tells us something. Ross was not wrong. The show said so. The conversation is in the episode. The timeline is in the episode. The word break comes directly out of Rachel's mouth, and the phone call Ross made before anything happened is in there too, if anyone is still counting. None of that helped him. From the moment the show cut to Rachel's face and held it there, it wasn't making an argument. It was making a decision. It decided whose experience we would live inside, whose pain would feel like our pain, and whose defense would sound like an excuse. We thought we were forming an opinion. We were just receiving one. Ross was convicted by screen time, by the laugh track, by the camera choosing, again and again, to linger on Rachel's experience rather than his reasoning. The show did not prove Ross wrong. It made being right irrelevant. And that is the part that is hard to put back down. Not as a reading of Friends, but as a question about everything else we absorbed during those years. Friends did it. Seinfeld did it. The Office did it. Every show we watched weekly, trusted completely, never thought to question because the laugh track told us where to land. And we landed there, and we called it our own opinion. How many other verdicts are sitting in us right now about people we know, situations we lived through, that arrived exactly that way? Through tone, through screen time, through nothing more than whose face the camera held longest. We don't really have a way to check. If this is your first time here, Millennial Rewind is where we go back into the shows we grew up with. Not to be nostalgic, but to figure out what they were actually doing to us. There's a lot more where this came from. If Ross and Rachel thing sat with you, stick around. We're just getting started. In the meantime, please consider subscribing to our channel. We hope you enjoyed this video. We'll see you on the next one. Until then, please take care of yourself.